So imagine your nerves as an electrical cable conducting signals from your brain to the rest of your body. It has a coating around the nerve, around the electric cable. That coating is eaten away by the immune system when you have MS.
Hello everyone and happy Assyrian New Year. It's Rhoda and I am so excited to be back with episode 57 of the Assyrian podcast. You know how Assyrians generally joke about the minute you say who your grandfather is or what village your dad is from, suddenly everyone knows who you are and you're all connected? Well, I may not know too much about the villages in the homeland, but I know that you're bound to be Facebook friends with someone who knows someone else and boom, now you're connected. That's exactly how I found out about today's guest, Mark Elisha. So Mark's aunt, his mom's sisters, and his cousins live in California. I used to live in California and knew them from church, and I happened to be Facebook friends with one of his aunts, Maureen. One day, right before I left for a trip to Australia back in February, I saw a video that she had shared on Facebook about a young guy from Sydney and his battle with multiple sclerosis. I watched this video about the peer support group that Mark is involved with, and I knew I wanted to meet him and talk to him. We'll link the video I'm talking about in the show notes, and you should check it out if you get a chance. Before meeting Mark, I knew of one fictional character with MS, that being President Josiah Bartlett from The West Wing, and two people in real life, all three of whom have inspired me in one way or another because I know their battle isn't easy, but they get up every day and try as hard as possible to live a full life, even when they sometimes suffer in silence because their struggles and their disease is not always visible. In this week's episode, Mark talks about his battle with MS and also his family and what being a part of the peer support group has meant to him. He's also raising money for an MS walk in Sydney, which takes place on Sunday, April 7th. If you listen to this episode and are moved to donate to this cause, we'll have the link in the show notes. I am every week inspired by the different Assyrians we feature on the Assyrian podcast, and Mark's resilience and fighting spirit is no exception. Mark is a true warrior who exemplifies what it looks like to live your best life in the midst of unique and challenging circumstances. And I'm so glad he agreed to share his story with us. But before we get into this week's interview, support for this podcast comes from Tony Kalogerakos and the injury lawyers of Illinois and New York. If you know anyone who has been in a serious accident, please reach out to Tony Kalogerakos. Tony has been recognized as a top 40 lawyer and a rising star by Super Lawyers publication and has obtained multiple multi-million-dollar awards. Tony can be reached at injuryrights.com or 847-982-9516. And now, here's Mark Elisha. So, according to your Facebook profile, you're from Dubai.
Yeah, I was born and raised there. My parents moved out to Dubai back when it was first getting started, back in the late 80s. So we lived there for quite a few years.
How did they decide to go to Dubai?
So my dad initially, both my parents were born and raised in Iraq. And like a lot of Assyrians, ended up leaving Iraq in the very early 80s. So my dad went to Kuwait. That was his first stop after he left. So the company that he worked for in Kuwait ended up opening an office in Dubai, and eventually they had actually moved to Sydney. They were living in Sydney, and then they decided to go back to Dubai. So that's sort of how we ended up there. Yeah.
Up until last summer, I'd say, I had no idea there were Assyrians in Dubai. One of my friends from Chicago told me she was going to Dubai to visit her cousins. So I realized there were Assyrians who lived there. Was there an Assyrian community there when you grew up?
Yeah, there definitely was. There was a bigger community maybe a few years ago. For whatever reason, the numbers have slowly declined over the last maybe even handful of years. But growing up, there was always a few families around, and we really got to quite a big number in the probably early 2000s, mid-2000s, mid-aughts. Okay. Yeah, we were probably around 100 people, if not more, from all over. Okay. Yeah, and people have ended up immigrating to Canada and the States, and the usual sort of story,
Sure.
I guess.
How did your family end up moving back to Australia for good?
Okay, so moving to Australia was mainly pushed on by my health. My situation sort of changed in 2015. I've had MS since 2013, and my sort of disability started to increase in 2015. And just managing the illness, living abroad in Dubai was becoming difficult. We're actually Australian citizens, so it made more sense to be here and have access to the healthcare system here.
Sure.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works, how it worked for us.
Okay.
But we had a lot of family in Australia, so
Okay.
that's made it easier
Yeah.
to pick here, to move for sure.
What did you study in Dubai? I assume you went to school there.
Yeah.
What did you study?
Yeah, we studied in Dubai. Yeah, we had school just like everywhere else. I graduated. I finished high school there, and then I moved to Canada to study chemical engineering.
Okay.
I lived in Montreal for 5 years. Went to McGill, and then moved back to Dubai to work in the chemical industry. Yeah, so Dubai, I was lucky. I had a really good education system over there that I got to take advantage of, and people from my school ended up going all over the world to study.
Nice.
So we had a bunch of people in Canada, the States, Australia, and yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it was a nice place to be.
So schooling in Dubai and Montreal explains the lack of an Australian accent.
Yeah, it does. I think there's that bit, and also I've got a lot of family in the States, so we used to spend our summers there in California, where my mom's family live in Redwood City.
Right.
So apparently you know them.
I do, which is very close to San Francisco, which is how I know them.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So we used to spend at least 2 months a year almost there. So if you talk to them, my cousins in California, they sound a lot like me, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched a video of yours on Facebook, and I thought, okay, I got to know more about him living in Australia but not really having an accent. Like I told you though, I think your dad has an accent.
Yeah, my dad almost has a switch that he can flip to put on a bit more of an Australian accent. We used to be more pronounced back when we used to visit. Now that we've lived here for a while, I think he's found a middle ground.
Yeah.
Where, he's comfortable with. Yeah.
What are the major differences you noticed between living in Dubai and living in Australia?
Oh, well, it's a completely different lifestyle. Dubai is very flashy. Everyone is flashy. The
Sure.
city's flashy. We are probably a little more materialistic, a little more indoors sort of centric. Over here, everyone wants to be outside all the time. There's that sort of vibe. You're always at the beach. You're always outdoors, basically. In Dubai, you've got a lot of impermanence. People are there temporarily for the most part. You don't really interact with a lot of citizens from Dubai. So it's kind of an interesting vibe. You meet a lot of people for a couple of years. They're in and out of your life. In Australia, I get the feeling that you're here for the long haul, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are probably the biggest things, I'd say. Dubai is one of the most multicultural spots in the entire world. You've got people from literally everywhere. Australia is also very much a multicultural place, but not on the same level as Dubai, I'd say.
Yeah.
In Dubai, you might go out and hear, 5 different languages on a night out. Here, you're only ever going to hear English, probably.
Have your parents been back to Iraq since they first left?
Yeah, no, they haven't. That's a tough one, I think, for them. I don't know how they deal with it on a day-to-day, but yeah, my parents left Iraq, and my dad tells the story of how he left as if he was going on a summer holiday or a semester break, sort of, when he was in university. One suitcase in his hand, and never came back to Iraq. That was it. He left and started his life. That was that. He was a grown man at that point, basically, and I can't even imagine it. I came back home, I think, at that age. Well, at that age, my dad was leaving the house. My mom, likewise, she left Iraq, and her and her sister went to California. They were early 20s, but then just moving from Baghdad to San Francisco. I can't even imagine it. Yeah, so they haven't been back though. My dad, I think he's he would always he's always said that he doesn't want to see Iraq in the current situation that it is. Doesn't appeal to him to see it the way it is now. He'd rather, I guess, keep that memory of when they were there.
When you were talking about your dad leaving, the thing that I thought of is that people who immigrate, who leave their, home countries, most of them get a chance to kind of say goodbye and do these, like, the last time I'm going to do this, I'm going to say goodbye and go through that process. And he didn't have any of that, and he just and left.
Exactly. We went through that in Dubai, actually, when we left. I left my job there in March, and we didn't leave until October of 2015. So there was quite a few going away parties, and last time of this, last time of that. Somehow I felt that my situation was changing, my physical situation was changing, and that coming back to Dubai might not happen very soon, I guess.
Sure.
So, but no, it's a crazy way to have to, crazy thing to have to go through. I think from my parents' perspective, I can still go back to Dubai, like, and but for them, I don't know if they'll ever go back to Iraq. I really don't.
Yeah. And you have a sister. Is she older or younger?
No, I've got a younger sister.
Okay.
Yeah, Amanda. She's great. She's got a government job. They're working on making Sydney more livable. But yeah, it's a really cool.
Livable in what sense?
So in Sydney, if you live out in the west, you tend to commute. I live in the west, western part of Sydney. That's where a lot of Assyrians actually tend to live. A lot of the jobs tend to be on the more easterly, like in the city.
Right.
So you tend to have to drive a lot to work and to play as well. So their plan or their goal is to make the rest of the greater Sydney area, I guess, more accessible for people to work in, to play in, to live in, without having to commute those long hours, I guess. Probably doing a terrible job of explaining it, but that's what it is. That's what I think that she does every day. Right?
Okay. So you were diagnosed with MS when you were 24, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Can you explain what MS is, first of all?
All right. Well, MS is, broadly speaking, it's an autoimmune disease. So it's an autoimmune disease that impacts your your central nervous system. So what happens is your white blood cells that make up your immune system attack your nerves, literally the coating of the nerves. So imagine your nerves as an electrical cable conducting signals from your brain to the rest of your body. It has a coating around the nerve, around the electric cable. That coating is eaten away by the immune system and when you have MS. So there isn't really a warning system with MS. You don't sort of slowly just, your MS just kind of switches on. It goes from off to on all of a sudden. So I just woke up one day and had sort of tingling in my fingers, and I was in the gym. I suddenly couldn't do lunges. Like my leg wasn't responding to what I wanted it to do. Yeah, it just sort of showed up out of nowhere, completely out of nowhere.
And so, like, everything was fine, and then you have this experience at the gym. That was the first time
pretty much
you ever experienced it.
Yeah, the first time was, I was on, there was two sort of, that first week, I had a phone call with someone, and all of a sudden, I hung up the phone, and my finger started to tingle. Just out of nowhere. And then a couple of days later, I'm in the gym, and yeah, that lunges, suddenly I couldn't do lunges, and then by the end of like this first or second week, I had a laundry list of symptoms all of a sudden, of things that just showed up out of nowhere. Then I started the sort of process of trying to figure out what was going on. That was a whole another task, for like 6 months basically.
Wow.
I saw specialists all over the world. Actually, yeah, to go with the sort of Dubai lifestyle, that sort of, we ended up seeing doctors in Dubai and in California and in Beirut trying to figure out what was going on, because we couldn't like get a definite sort of diagnosis at first.
So when you had that experience at the gym, that was like a one-time thing. How long did it take for you to like go back to having feeling in your, and then it happening again?
Yeah. So for me, I didn't lose complete feeling.
Okay.
I was still able to use the body parts that were affected. And let's say the symptoms, when you have a relapse, so that's when you typically, your symptoms all spike up. Your symptoms go up to a 10 out of 10 on a, and then over time they'll decrease to like a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on your type of MS. So let's say mine started at a 10, and then they went back down to about a 2 or a 3. They've never gone away completely since that day, for me anyway. The only symptom over time that's decreased, that sort of showed up and went away, was blurred vision. I had double vision for like a couple, 3 weeks, in like 6 months after my first bout of MS.
What was going through your mind when you were in those 6 months when you were trying to get a diagnosis?
It's funny, I always thought, as soon as I heard the possibility that I had the MS, for some reason I was like, okay, I have MS. I had kind of accepted it pretty early on, and I was frustrated that I wasn't getting treated. I really wanted to get down to it, mainly I guess because I just wanted to be proactive. I was worried. I didn't know enough about the illness. At the time, I just didn't know enough. I didn't realize just how serious it could be, but I figured it would be better to start treating than not to treat. So those first 6 months were stressful for sure from that perspective. And I didn't have that support system in place that I have now, where I can reach out to other people with MS. There's a huge online community nowadays of people with the disease, and you can get a lot of information from them. And that's really the best source, from my experience, to understand just how serious the disease can be. Because you can get like a different picture when you maybe see an ad for a drug company. You see people living very comfortably with MS, when in actual fact it's quite a difficult disease to manage and to live with.
How long did it take for you to go from how you were before and then to like using a cane, and then now you use a wheelchair?
It only took about 1.5 years for my walking to change quite substantially. Yeah, by 2015, I had slowed down, let's say. I went from being able to run to being able to walk. I used to measure myself on the treadmill. So I used to be able to run at a 9, 10, speed on the treadmill. And I went down to a 5 sort of in the course of a week. And then by 2016, I could only walk for about 10-15 minutes. And then by 2017, so now we're talking 4 years from my first symptoms, I started using a cane. And then it happened quite quickly after that. Within a couple months, I was using a walker and a wheelchair almost at the same time, basically.
I tried to imagine what this must have been like for you, and I couldn't possibly. One of the things that struck me as a difficult part of the process, aside from just your life changing in the physical way and your mobility and all that, one of the hard things I imagined was you having to tell people that you were diagnosed with MS, because I kept thinking all these emotions that you've had, like every time you tell the story, they start all over again.
Absolutely.
And then you may find yourself in a place where you're comforting the other person because you're like, I've accepted it. I've had time to process it. Is that an accurate description of like things you went through?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first got MS, I was far more guarded, far more private with my condition. Because I didn't enjoy having the conversation. It's a long conversation. For one, it's not easy to explain to people. I consider myself fairly clued in, I guess, and I even knew of a fictional character with the disease, and I still had no idea what the disease was about. So trying to sit and explain to people, and at the same time, my symptoms were mainly not visible to others at the time. I didn't enjoy having the conversation, and I just decided not to for the most part. Because one, the emotional toll wasn't pleasant. I mean, it's unpleasant. There's so much unpleasantness with MS. Talking about it, it doesn't help sometimes, and it was just easier than not having to explain it to people, for sure.
You also talked in one of your videos about the kind of loneliness someone with MS experiences, and I feel like it goes along with what you were just saying, because you don't have any visible signs. No one knows what you're going through.
100%.
Can you talk more about what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just came from an event on Valentine's Day where the people that produced that video did a sort of a thank you for people who are involved with the organization. And there's a couple speakers, MS ambassadors, who, you know, shared their experiences. And you wouldn't know from looking at them that they have MS. But as soon as they started talking and digging into it, like the emotions come right to the surface of, you know, just how impactful it is. It affects your family so much as well, depending on your situation. I mean, we've got a very high divorce rate with people with MS because you end up relying a lot on your partner, whoever, you know, for support. But yeah, the loneliness is a big part of it. You're out on a night out, let's say, and you're worrying about things like a lot of people with MS have a weak bladder. Where's the nearest bathroom? How am I going to get to the bathroom? For me, even shaking hands became a sort of, I had a sort of mental block around it because my hands were affected. So like just shaking people's hands was an issue for me. More of a self-conscious one, sure. You know, probably wasn't that people wouldn't know, but for me to actually find someone's hand, you know, make sure to make that connection correctly in quotations, was difficult. And no one would know, you know, there's no way you would know unless I told you I had MS. I remember this one time early on, I was getting treated for Lyme disease because Lyme disease actually shares a lot of the symptoms of MS. So that they took a blood test and they found Lyme antibodies or whatever they did. Anyway, that treatment is a month's worth of antibiotics that you get intravenously. So you go in and they leave a cannula in your arm to go home with. So I was going to work with this cannula and like covering it up with long sleeves. And I remember one of my customers like sort of saw it underneath my shirt and he said, "What's going on? What, you know, are you?" And I wasn't prepared to talk to him about it, but then there you go. There sort of opened up a can of worms, or I had to tell him then, which was fine. I mean, not everyone, but most people are very comforting and understanding and want to know more, but it's just not a conversation you want to have every day.
Sure.
Yeah.
You talked about having a support system and your family. The other thing that struck me, and the other thing I think is true about not just MS, but other things that we go through, is we never experience things alone, that our family, albeit in a different way, has some of those experiences and it impacts their life. How would you say your family was impacted?
Well, the family, first off, they've all moved with me. I mean, we went from living, you know, in the Middle East, in Dubai. Now we've all moved here. My parents chose to retire as well. Like they were working full time up until we moved. So there's that obvious one. And then there's the emotional impact. I mean, your parents start to think, you know, what could we have done differently? Is it somehow our fault that this happened? Of course it isn't. It just sort of shows up out of nowhere. But I mean, I would say that we've gotten a lot closer because of MS. We've always been a tight-knit group, but we've gone somehow even closer. I really rely on them all day, every day, basically, at this point. So we've gotten a lot closer because of MS.
The other thing that I was thinking about was that whenever you're diagnosed with something like MS, you might find yourself at some kind of a crossroad where you're going to think, okay, this is just how it is, and I'm going to let this rule over me, or try to control. Like, control is such a weird word when it comes to something like MS, but try to take control of my life as much as I possibly can. Did you find yourself at that particular crossroad at some point?
Yeah, definitely. I found myself at different points trying to deal with MS differently. I got to a point where I was just trying to contain it. I was thinking, I sort of connected physical activity with worsening my conditions. So I got to a stage where I was really minimizing my physical activity. So I'd lost control there, I think. I'd let MS completely control that part of my life. More recently, though, I've tried to take a more proactive approach, be more physically active, because all the literature, all the evidence out there points to physical activity being a good thing, keeping you healthier. and lessening the effects of the disability. You might still pick up disabilities, but at least you've got a better baseline to fight against that. In 2017, when we moved to Sydney, I had been trying to get onto a more aggressive treatment for a couple of years. So I finally got onto that, and I sort of decided that if I got there, I'd make some changes. So like I quit smoking completely when I started that treatment. I started going to the gym again after that. I've tried different diets and that sort of thing, but because there's a few different diets that are out there that say that they've helped people with MS, but I've not found that I can stick to them, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, but you've got to keep like fighting against it, I think, because you're gonna have MS for a long time. People you can't forget that, I guess. It's not a disease that actually, like getting into the brass tacks here, it doesn't shorten lifespans. You live with MS as long as a typical person would live. So you've got to sort of decide that, okay, how am I gonna work? How am I gonna fix this? How am I gonna live with this? Yeah.
You're a part of the MS support group that made that video, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
What did it mean for you to find that community, and how has being a part of a community like that helped you?
So it helped a lot to talk to someone who's been through MS and who's been the guy that I spoke to, that I was connected to. He had the same sort of disability progression that I had. So it was really good to hear from him, to hear that he's still living a pretty full life. Like he's got a family, 2 kids, and they're always busy. They're always very active people. It really definitely helped to just hear about how that person combats or fights against his MS. And it's been a good thing to be a part of, and I've chosen to volunteer my time as well. And now after our conversation today, I've got a call with somebody that I'm starting to be his peer supporter. I'm more than happy to be involved that way. But yeah, it's been a good experience. My peer support buddy, his name's Matt, and we've gotten a lot closer over the last 18 months. I guess we've been talking to each other. It's been a really good experience, and it's something you can't substitute or from speaking to people with that same experience that you're going through. It's so beneficial, and it really teaches you a lot about how you can go about doing things.
How did you find out that such a group existed?
So MS Australia is actually very active for whatever reason. We've got about, I think, 20,000 people in Australia who have MS. But MS Australia is very well funded, I don't know how well funded they are, but they're very active anyway. So when I first moved here, I found them online. That's, I think, ms.org.au, and I wanted information about neurologists, about who I could talk to, because I had no idea who would be a good person to talk to. So that was my first interaction with them. Later on, I needed help with disability services, support services. In Australia, we have a system here called the NDIS that you sort of have to connect to them. It's a government program that provides funding to people with disabilities. So they have heaps of information on how to get yourself set up, and they've got support workers essentially that will help guide you through that process. So that was the next time I went to them. I've seen a urologist, I guess, through them. I've seen an occupational therapist. I've seen a physical therapist. And this was just another service that they recommended that I try out. Yeah, it's amazing. Like you've even got things like temporary stays. Like you can go and stay at their facilities for a couple days or whatever. If your carers want to go on holiday or something like that, you can stay there for a couple nights.
That's amazing.
It's an amazing place. It really is. Yeah, really amazing group of people.
What's the treatment process like for MS?
So the treatments are just as varied, I suppose, as the symptoms can be. There's I sort of lump them into 3 different generations. You've got your sort of injectables. So that was sort of the first generation. You literally inject yourself. You take shots every day or every other day. and those had like a 30% success rate at preventing disease progression. So with MS, you're not trying to cure the disease because we don't have a cure for MS. You're trying to modify. It's called. They're literally the term is disease modifying therapy. So it's trying to change the course of the disease progression, or halt. Ideally halt.
So it doesn't get worse.
Exactly. So you that's it. Yeah. So the second generation were medication were oral sort of pills. Pretty straightforward. You take a pill every day or every other day or whatever. And then there's another generation. The newest sort of tool we've got are infusions. So infusions are what I'm actually currently taking. It's a drug called Limtrada is the trade name, and alemtuzumab is the drug itself. It used to be used in leukemia, or it still is used for treating leukemia. What it does is it goes in and literally wipes out part of your immune system, and it lets your body regenerate that without the sort of the flaws, the faulty bits. That's the idea anyway. So that has I think a 75 or 80% success rate at preventing disease progression. There's a couple medications now, a couple on the market anyway. And then there's the last, or sort of the most aggressive treatment, which isn't still widely used, is called HSCT, which is a combination of chemotherapy and stem cell treatment. It's a lot more aggressive, I suppose, and the recovery process is a little longer. Like, it's more chemo for one. It completely wipes out your immune system. Then they inject your stem cells in some fashion or the other. But yeah, there's things coming along. The one thing we haven't really had progress on is reversal of symptoms. Yeah.
And I assume there are researchers and doctors who are obviously working on those things.
There are, absolutely. I'm always surprised by how much attention MS gets in that sense. There's a lot of research happening. My involvement with those is quite minimal. I have a couple fundraising efforts. One is through ms.org, through that video that you've seen. And then we're also doing a walk in April in Sydney. So through that, last year we raised about $10,000 just on my team. Yeah, it was really
that's
good.
Amazing.
Yeah. The whole, I think the walk in Sydney raised $200,000 or $300,000, and it was all it went to supports services for people with MS and also research. Yeah.
So you're doing that walk again?
Yeah, we're doing it again this year. It was so much fun. We had about, I think, 30 people on our team.
Nice.
And yeah, we had people donating from all over the world. My cousin from California happened to be here at the time, and she walked with us. And yeah, it was just a beautiful day out down by the harbor here in Sydney.
Nice.
And yeah, we're going to do it again in April. I think we're up to about $2,500, $3,000 now fundraising already.
What's your goal?
Mine, I've set it at 10,000 again.
Okay.
So we're about a month and a half away now. We'll hopefully start to ramp that up.
And if anyone wants to contribute to your fundraising efforts, how can they find the information for that?
So it's on my Facebook page. I might tweet it out. I don't know how active.
Maybe you can send it to me.
I might send it to you. Yeah.
We can post it on the show notes.
Yes. It's anyway. If you look up the MS Walk and Fun Run in Sydney,
Okay.
And our team is called Still Smilin'. So that's a play on words. The coating of your nerves are called myelin. So we've Still Smilin'. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we're trying to put T-shirts together as well. One of my friends, Tanya, she's a bit of an artist, I guess. So she's putting together a T-shirt for us with smiley faces and different sorts of things.
What do you want people to know about MS or people with MS?
So that's an interesting question. People with MS are super resilient, I guess. There's a perception, I think, that we're unable to do certain things. Like, I know people with MS have a more difficult time in the job place. Like, we go through a big most people with MS have to make that decision of whether they're going to tell people they have it, their employers, if they have MS or not. So that's always a difficult conversation to have.
Sure.
But I think that's the big thing. We're really a resilient bunch. People with MS deal with a lot on a daily basis that most people would struggle with, I think. Yeah, we're capable of a lot, and we're all fighters. That's probably what I want people to know.
And you have a job and you work, and
I do. Yeah, I do. I think it's one of the, for me, it's been a very important thing to keep working, even though I'm only doing 3 days a week now, but that fits better with my lifestyle. Yeah, I work, and it keeps my brain active as well, which is important because MS can impact your cognitive function as well as your physical abilities. Yeah, it's crucial, and I've gotten a lot of support there at work. For me, it's impossible to hide the fact that I have some sort of disability, but they were all donators to my walk last year, and yeah, like I said, very supportive people for sure.
And what do you do? What is your job?
Sure, I work for a beer company. I work in sales support. It's pretty boring stuff, but it basically keeps our sales staff out selling beer. I help make their job a little bit easier.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Beer is a very Assyrian thing.
Apparently,
Assyrians
we did invent beer, I guess. Yeah. So keeping the tradition going.
There
I
you
guess.
go. Yeah. What are some of your other interests and some of the things that you like to do in your free time?
Well, I've always been into sports. I used to play a lot more sports than I do now.
Sure.
Now tend to watch and and listen to a lot of podcasts about sports. When it comes to podcasts, I do tend to listen to a lot of sports like basketball and football and whatnot. That's what I tend to enjoy. Watch a lot of TV, I guess, nowadays. Like to cook. That was a big passion of mine. It's not as much anymore because, again, cooking is difficult in a wheelchair, I find anyway. So I tend to eat more, which is all good. Not
a bad thing.
Exactly, yeah. Not a bad thing. That's me, I guess. Food and sports and socializing, seeing friends as much as possible, because you can isolate yourself when you have MS.
Sure.
I think it's very easy to say no. It's going to be tough. For me. So you always have to push yourself, I think, to stay out there, because as soon as you tell people no once and then you tell people no a second time, they're not going to call you anymore. Mm-hmm. Like that's just how people are, not to say people have cut me off or whatever,
sure.
But I think you got to be mindful of that. People start thinking, I don't want to bother Mark, he's going through enough or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what I want people to think, I guess.
Yeah. You talked about being a fighter and being resilient. What keeps you going every morning when you wake up?
For one, it's my family, and friends, and the other is just there's more I want to do in my life. It's not just because I have MS. I'm gonna stop. One thing for sure that has reduced is like I used to travel a lot more and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So now my goal is to see more of Australia, and I think there's always hope of getting a little bit better, if not fully recovering, at least having a bit of an improvement in my symptoms. So that keeps me going for sure. 100%. Yeah, and also nowadays it's being an advocate, I guess, for people with disabilities, people with MS. I think I'm well positioned to get the word out and raise awareness, try to get more funding, and be there as a supporter for people who get diagnosed with MS. I think people with the disease need to help the next generation of people with MS.
Absolutely. I can see how that would be that would be a difficult part, just not knowing what to do, feeling alone because the people maybe in your immediate group, your family, your friends, none of them are going through these things. And so being able to reach out and find people who are, and I like what you said that, your lifespan is the same as anybody else. Yeah. And so you want to make sure you continue to live a full life
as much as possible. And even when you talk to the experts, when you first get diagnosed, your neurologist might give you 3 different drug options, and you're meant to go home and decide. based on what information,
Sure.
God only knows. Like, yeah, it's not easy, because you don't know anything about MS when you first get diagnosed. Even now, like, I don't, not just because I don't know it, but the science isn't that defined about how the disease progresses and why and things like that. So there's always dark spots with MS.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for talking to me about your life and giving us more insight about MS. And I think it's not something that people talk about. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I think it would be helpful for people to know more. Knowledge is power, but also to be able to know how to help and what somebody with MS would want someone else to think of them and their life. And I appreciate you so much talking about that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for reaching out. It's always good, I think, to get our stories out there.
Hi again. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. It was so nice to be back with you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and review us wherever you're listening. We'd love to hear from you. Whether you're just dropping in to say hi or you have someone to suggest for a future episode, head to www.assyrianpodcast.com to find the different ways to connect with us. You can also find us on all social media platforms. Thanks again, and see you next Tuesday.